Welcome to Tampa Home Talk with your host, native Tampa real estate girl, Katrina Madewell, a full-time, passionate, out-of-the-box thinker, love for home ownership kind of realtor with over 21 years of combined mortgage and real estate experience. Tune in every week at this time for expert advice on everything you need to know about home ownership, finance, maintaining great credit, building wealth, and making your everyday life better, and how you can be financially successful today and tomorrow. Remember, love where you live or let Katrina fix it. Now, here's your host of Tampa Home Talk, Katrina Madewell.
Good afternoon. This is your host, Katrina Madewell, with Charles Ruttenberg Realty on the Real Estate Radio Network. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for Tampa Home Talk. If you're just joining us today for the first time, you can catch us here every Thursday and Saturday at 5 p.m. here on 1340, 1400, and 1350. Have that right, Lee?
Pretty close.
Feel free to check us out also on the web. We'll be at tampahometalk.com, also on Facebook and Twitter and across the web, and catch all of our podcasts at Tampa Home Talk. So this afternoon, we have some fantastic guests lined up for you. We also have another guest coming on Saturday. If you are listening around, we'll have a brand new show for you coming up Saturday with Sarah Cricky, Silverton Mortgage. We're going to talk about mortgage follies and the 10 things that you need to know before you ever get a home mortgage. But today in studio, we're going to have with us Danielle Evans with Gateway Appraisal Services. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, Danielle.
Thank you for having me.
I know you're taking a lot of time out of your day, and it's you real estate appraisers stay as busy as we do, so I know how your day can be, and I certainly appreciate you taking time out to be with me in studio.
I appreciate you having me here.
Now, you had a crazy morning this morning, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
We have some content actually lined up for today's show, and we're going to dive into that stuff in a few minutes and talk about some of the requirements to be an appraiser, and also some of the things that we see all the time, and they're things that you should be on the lookout, whether you're a buyer or a seller, and they're things that your agent should be doing. If your agent's me, then you can count on the fact that we'll be doing that. So let's talk about, we'll dive into what the requirements are to be an appraiser in a few minutes, but let's talk about, we'll open the show with something fun and talk about some of the crazy stuff that we see.
Oh, we see it all. From hostile tenants to hostile homeowners to squatters. We get a little bit of it all. And then we also have beautiful homes, beautiful beaches, and we really love our jobs.
Now, I know that you basically do a lot of appraisals. That's also, it's referred, but you also have a lot of different work that you get from different we'll call them lender vendors.
Yes.
And a lot of different secondary market places like that. So a lot of times when these bank-owned properties come back, they're having you guys do an appraisal before and or after it hits the market. Even some of the short sales, you guys get called to do the appraisals on.
Even if they're in a process, we're not aware. Nobody's aware of us being there, but we're supposed to be there. And we sometimes catch people off guard. They think just one appraiser is coming out to appraise the home for a short sale, but there's many things going on in the background that there's reason for people to be at those homes to turn them and get them occupied again.
Now, I know what we see, and we encountered this recently because we move a lot of properties too, but we sold a Fannie Mae Home Path property, and the client actually was saying, hey, I knew there was an appraisal done, but can I get a copy of that? And I'm thinking, that's a long shot. I'm going to ask for you, but I don't think it's going to happen. So sure enough, they responded back and they said, yeah, it's internal. Half the time we don't even see it, but we don't have access to that information. And there's more than one done.
And really what it comes down to is the intended user of the appraisal is the owner of the appraisal. It does not matter who paid for it, who actually asked the appraiser for it. The intended user that is listed on the appraisal report is the only person that gets a copy from the appraiser, and they're not allowed to share it with anybody else. And from there, it's up to that intended user. If they want to share it, they can. If they don't, they don't.
Now, I know my friend Jamie Maloney, he hosts another show on a different platform where he used to be, but he lists a lot of real estate REO properties, that have been taken back from the banks. And some of the stories I hear from him are crazy. So I can imagine that a lot of time, my environment and the people that I work with are a lot different than some of the people that you guys encounter? Because it's just a different, where you get your business from is a little different.
It is. Our business comes from a computer, an email. There's no direct contact with the lender. There's no direct contact with the homeowner in some cases. In most cases, we go out to the home. We're given a lockbox code. We let ourselves in. We do our work and we leave. However, it's really important that if the home is being sold and improvements have been made, somebody needs to make us aware of them because we can't just guess them.
Absolutely. We're going to get into that in a lot more detail here on Tampa Home Talk in the later part of the show. So Danielle made a very good point. If you are someone that's selling your home or even someone buying it, it's going to be really important to have your agent or someone there to meet the appraiser to give them facts and data. But we'll get into that in a few minutes. So this morning, you had a big surprise. You went and did a inspection before you headed over to the studio for this afternoon. But how did your day start out? You want to talk about that a little bit? Because it's crazy. I think a lot of people don't understand the environment that we're put into sometimes. But I know for me, even as a real estate agent, I've walked into properties where, homeless people were living there, squatters were there, and they exited out the back real quick before I came in.
Typically, nobody's there to harm us. Nobody's there to bother us. They can tell we have a clipboard in our hand. They know what we're there for. Appraisers do not dress the same as agents. We wear comfortable clothing, enough comfort to get over a fence if needed.
Yeah,
we can't be out at the house in heels. Yeah. And so when a neighbor believes that we are, we're at the property trying to do destruction to it or trying to break into it, it just doesn't make sense. Why would we take pictures of it first and then break into it? There's got to be some common sense from the general public that the person's there to do a job. And if they tell you they're an appraiser, 99% of the time, they're probably an appraiser.
They kind of look the part. Like, you have a tape measure in your hand, you have a clipboard. I mean, you're writing stuff down, you're taking pictures.
I just because we don't label our vehicles that say we're appraisers, more so that is for our safety. I would not label my car and identify what I do for a living because I specialize in bank-owned properties and I do a lot of products that I deliver are to remove homes from people. They're not always for the benefit of the homeowner. Sometimes they are to benefit the bank. And I have to put myself in those situations for the job. I'm not going to put a label on it in the front yard and say who I am.
People lose sight of the fact that, even though it's a bank, it's still an entity or a person lending you the money.
Yes.
And it's not free. I mean, you have to pay. If you pay, you stay. If you don't, you won't. It's
exactly. And I can't choose. I am hired to be the intermediate, to be the unbiased decision in the middle. I have no vested interest in either side. At the end of the day, who's paying me is where, my concern is at. Whether I get hired by the bank or by the homeowner, I'm there to do a job.
Right. You're just there to do a job. It's interesting, though, because you had a crazy morning where you showed up and the neighbors kind of were hostile. It was a crazy environment.
In a very nice neighborhood at that. And no reason, just what it came down to is that the people that owned the house were losing the house and they left a lot of personal property behind, which is more or less what we look at as personal property. We don't even see it when we walk into a house. It's imaginary to us. There's no value on personal property. There's no reason to even look at it. And I think the neighborhood is trying to do the right thing and protect the house. But the minute I say I'm a real estate appraiser, they should not try to demand where I'm from, what company I'm working for, what bank has ordered the appraisal. It is against guidelines for me to disclose any of that, and it's putting me in jeopardy with my client.
No, I'm curious. Do you have, for example, with the state, when they send us our license and our renewals, we get the regular license, but we get a little wallet-sized copy too. I don't even know if I ever carry that, but I was just curious.
We have a wallet-sized copy, and we're required to show them at gated communities to get in. We have to have for age, some appraisers don't carry it, but for me, I carry it for safety. And in this case, when the police were called because the homeowners were the neighborhood was pretty upset, they got hostile and they wanted to know why I was there, and they weren't taking my answers as factual evidence. The police did come out because a neighbor, they were trying to stop me from getting into my car. I was scared. I called the police. And then as soon as I get in my car, they start banging on my windows. It was just a matter of they wanted to know where I was, why I was there, who the bank, what bank is coming to take this property. And I understand that there's many emotions involved, but we have no idea where they're coming from.
It's not even their property. It's not really their
property.
Place to do that.
And for me, I have an agent, a lender, and a reputation to withhold. And so it's really tricky for me to stay very calm in these situations and just be able to walk away from them. Even, sometimes we do have things thrown at our cars, or people, I've had people try to take my camera from me before. That could cost me an entire day of work. Right. If somebody, you can have the camera, just give me the camera card inside. Right. And that's what I tell them all. I'll take the camera card out and give them the camera if anybody was trying to steal it, because the pictures inside the camera are my entire day's worth of work.
Yeah, you lose that. It's like erased. It's gone.
Yes, and there's no way to fix that without having to go out and reinspect all the houses you've seen that day.
So we have Danielle Evans in studio today with Gateway Appraisal Services here on Tampa Home Talk. Your background, you started in the industry in 2003.
Yeah, 2003, 2004. It was,
and then you started out actually training appraisers, like learning the ropes, and then you said, "Hey, I'm going to jump in and do this," right? At some point.
Yeah, I had a relation with a close family that owned a real estate company and a real estate school. And I really took the time and invested, and really I had a lot of pushing from the owner of this school, and he was my stepfather in the end. And he pushed me to become an appraiser because I was in an industry that there was no way of having a day off. And I was raising kids, and I didn't have the availability of time to be with my kids and run a restaurant and own a restaurant.
You get some more flexibility.
Yeah. And he came to me with a dream of me being able to be at my kids' soccer games. And I just jumped on it. And I was hesitant at first because all the rules and the laws have changed over the years, and it's very hard to become an appraiser. And I was just lucky enough to have a lot of good support behind me. And I had excellent mentors that taught me everything I know today.
It's interesting. We were talking about the requirements to be an appraiser. They're so strict now compared to what they were, I think, because of a lot of the change that's been encountered in the market. And the thing I learned, too, the other day when we went to lunch was that there's general appraisers and also regular real estate appraisers, right?
There's a certified residential real estate appraiser. That's what I am. And then there's a certified general real estate appraiser who can complete commercial work. They are required a lot more education. And the new rules that have come down, I don't know how we're going to have very many appraisers coming into the industry with the amount of education requirements that are required.
So right now, if someone said, "Hey, I want to go be a real estate appraiser," I mean, obviously, I know you have to work under an appraiser for many, many years. You have to get that training. You have to get those hours. But they also have additional education requirements now, right?
They have to get, in some cases, a 2-year degree or a 40-year degree, depending on if they want to be a certified or a certified residential or a general. And then in addition, you need your 100 hours to become a trainee. Once you're a trainee, you have to build a log, which is anywhere from 2,000 to 3,000 hours of appraising. Well, when you break that down, their interpretation of 2,000 to 3,000 hours and our interpretation, it has to be broken down. And so the amount of appraisals that are needed to be completed by the trainee under the mentorship of a certified, it's approximately 2 years.
I'll say it's a lot.
So you're looking at 4 to 6 years to become an appraiser.
And that's 2 busy years.
And then you'll have no business, because you typically, when you become an appraiser, you go off on your own. You don't stay with who trained you. You're expected to go out and find your own business. And then the lenders require a 5-year experience in order to be on their approved appraiser list. So new appraisers coming into the industry have their hands tied behind their back, but I am more than willing to train anybody that would like to be an appraiser, and I would keep them on with me in the future to not only build my business, but if we don't, in the state of Florida, the amount of appraisers are continuing to decline, and if something isn't done about it soon, we're not going to have appraisers appraising homes.
And there's a huge difference between a real person and an appraiser that goes out there, physically looks at the property, sorts through all that data, and actually picks the best 3 comparables. Huge difference. I mean, I know if I was lending my money, I would want a real person to go out there and do that versus an automated valuation system.
Exactly. And that's what it's going to turn to. A computer-generated system, quite like Zillow, will be the future of appraising if something isn't done.
Which is such a joke. I mean, in the real estate industry,
Zillow is the biggest joke that we tell all the time. And when clients ask us, so how should my appraisal come in compared to Zillow? I tell them it's apples to oranges, and your appraisal will look nothing like what Zillow gave you. In order to complete an appraisal, there is at minimum 575 questions to answer just on the form itself. An appraiser has anywhere from 600 to 900 decisions to make to complete an appraisal and then take on the liability of the appraisal in addition.
Well, you're listening to Tampa Home Talk. We are going to get into just a few minutes about property condition because there's a lot of information there with regards to that report. And these are things that have changed even over the years since I started on the mortgage side many years ago. But this is your host, Katrina Madewell. You're listening to Tampa Home Talk. We have to take a real quick break. We'll be back in just a minute to continue on with property condition and things you need to know in the appraisal report. Back in a minute.
Ask me about an inside secret to save several hundreds of dollars on your annual homeowner's insurance premium. Text the word WIND, W-I-N-D, to 813-377-2775. Again, 813-377-2775.
I'm John Rakowski, the broker with Charles Ruttenberg Realty. If you are a real estate agent and want to keep more of your hard-earned commission, call me today at 727-538-9200 extension 2. This call will change your real estate career.
Hi, I'm Ike Antonio Thomas, Director of Salitas House, where we offer homeownership workshops, pre-purchase counseling, foreclosure intervention counseling for homeowners at risk of losing their home, financial coaching for adults and teens. Come sign up for our program where if you save $1,000, we'll give you $1,000. Call us 813-425-4847. Again, 813-425-4847. You can like us on Facebook or you can find us on the web, salitashouse.com.
Welcome back to Tampa Home Talk. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. If you missed any part of today's show, you can catch it on our website, which is tampahometalk.com. We're also available via a podcast across the web, Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Tampa Home Talk. In studio today, we have the pleasure of having Gateway Appraisal Services, Danielle Evans, talking about some of the crazy things that you guys see when you enter some of these properties sometimes. And I promised after the break we'd come back and jump into a little bit about property condition. Now, when I say property condition, let's talk about it because we have a tendency to use so much jargon in our industry. So if I feel like it's something the general audience or the person listening might need us to break down a little further, I'm going to say, hey, can you touch on that a little more? But when you talk about condition, let's talk about that because you guys rate it C1 through 5, right?
It's definitely the new UAD guidelines. They give us
and UAD
5 definitions.
What's UAD stand for? Uniform
data set.
A uniform appraisal data set, right? Okay.
Yes.
Just want to verify and make sure. Okay.
The new guidelines for these appraisal reports they give you the definition and then you're required to pretty much put the house within the definition. The condition of a home for C3 would be considered one that's been updated. A C4 would be one that is move-in ready, but could possibly need some improvements done to it. It's on its first life, meaning that
minor things.
So what it means is that the kitchen is original, the flooring is original. Now, when you look at that across the board, that's where it's so confusing. Somebody wants to see an adjustment for granite countertops versus Corian countertops. An appraiser has to make the decision of where they're going to adjust. One comparable sale can have a brand new roof and another comparable sale can have a brand new kitchen. Those have to be taken into consideration, and 99% of the time they wash themselves out. And so there's no adjustment made, and that's why they come back to us and say, well, that house had a fence and it had Corian countertops and it had a garden bathtub. Well, that's great, but it's in the same condition, quality rating and condition rating as the comparable sale. No adjustment would be warranted because we don't give adjustments for every single thing. And I can say this, no adjustment. I do not give adjustments for fences. there's no room for it on the appraisal in the first place. We only have so much room on the appraisal to adjust for as much as we possibly can.
Well, then you can get into depreciation and all this other stuff too.
And then what happens if it blows over between the time I inspect it and the house closes? Those things, we don't adjust for every single thing. We adjust for what we can accordingly. If we can't prove the adjustment, it shouldn't be used. Right. And 9 times out of 10, people will put an adjustment there, have no way to explain it. And that's what causes the loans to be caught up in closing and over silly mistakes.
So when you see like property condition C1 through 5, number C5 is the best or the worst?
C5 is non-livable. It's a home that
the roof is coming down and the mold is coming in and it's just terrible.
It's as bad as it can get.
So it's kind of like the reverse. The higher the number, the worse.
And And then the misconception is that a C1, everybody thinks their house should be a C1. The problem is a C1 is only designated to a brand new home that has never been lived in, has no depreciation whatsoever. So when somebody has upgraded their home from a C4 and so they had floor mica and they had vinyl flooring and carpet, and now they've put in hardwood floors, Corian countertops, all wood cabinets. They have only moved from a C4 to a C3. The adjustment wouldn't even be warranted if all of the comps that they use were upgraded in the same or similar manner. So we get the same thing every time. Homeowners say, but I just redid my whole house. It's a completely rehabbed home. Why isn't it a C1? Well, because you lived in it. Yeah. And somebody's lived in it. It's depreciated.
That's neat to gauge it, though, because when you think of C1 only, like we're reserving this for only brand new, which would make sense because
you have to reserve a spot for Q1, and C1 is reserved for spots that hold a high. It's to be able to, for the reader to understand. 9 times out of the 10, the reader doesn't read the definitions. They see the code on the appraisal of C1 through 4. And the first question we get is, what does C4 mean? Flip to the back of your appraisal and you'll find a list of definitions. And those will explain all of the codes that the appraisers are required to put in the appraisal.
I think it's important. I think it's a good thing that that's actually reserved for that, because there is a big difference. Like even from the real estate side, when we go out to assess a value for a homeowner who's looking to put it on the market, or even from a buyer's perspective, when you look at it from that respect, you have someone that if they have 2 homes and they're the same price, they're going to pick the new one every day over one that's a resale.
Exactly.
Unless there's
just like a new home,
upgrades.
A new home and a new car, same thing. If they're priced the same, why would you buy the used car? You're going to go out and buy the new one.
Right. It makes absolute sense.
And it's with houses also.
So it's interesting. And there's so much data in an appraisal report. I mean, you guys go over property condition, but you also talk about how far, and we get this one a lot, and it changes with the market. That's the best, easiest, most simplistic way that we can explain it. But essentially, we try to do whatever the appraisers are doing and whatever they have. So if they're going back 3 months or 6 months or 12 months to look at data, then we're trying to do the same thing. So what determines as an appraiser, how far back you're going to go, and talk about that process, where you start?
Up until recently, appraisers were required to use only sales. The first 2 comparable sales, it was a requirement that they be sold within 90 days. The third one had to be within 6 months. Recently, Fannie Mae has put out publication that directly states that an appraiser is not required they're not required to make an explanation for comps used over 6 months. So that leads me to believe that Fannie Mae would want us to use the best sales within the last 12 months, not the most recently closed sales. And so those rules are starting to shift. But I'll tell you, every lender that I work with, if I don't put the 2 most recent sales within the appraisal, they will come back and ask me why, and they'll want me to explain why those comps weren't used. Even if they were viable or not viable, they don't care. If it shows up on their CMA, they want to know why it's not in the report.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, I think you see trends, within certain neighborhoods where some neighborhoods have exponential appreciation over another neighborhood.
Yes. And in the case of homes that have been over improved for the area that they're in, and there are times where the home is theoretically valued, the market value is pulling it down. Even, if there was a potential buyer willing to pay cash, it would sell.
So over improved, this is the diamond in the rubble. This is the house that has everything and everything around
the
it.
The big
is
white
not
elephant. Yep. And people want to keep adding and adding and adding and pulling it outside of everything they're putting into the home. They're never going to get it back. If the subdivision itself or the immediate market around you is not calling for the things you're putting in your home, they don't belong there. An appraiser cannot magically make your market value go up. Your market value is based on the homes directly around you.
And you can live in a fabulous neighborhood. It's not a matter of that. It's a matter of, if you're so over improved, like the size, the condition, you put in top of the line, Anderson windows and doors, you had all this extra stuff, but none of the houses in the neighborhood have it. At some point, you're going to take a bit of a loss for that.
Exactly. At the end of the day, an appraiser cannot adjust for everything. If you put in a Kenmore refrigerator versus a GE, you can tell us all day long that's what you did, but we're still not going to give you an adjustment for it because we can't. We can't put an adjustment on everything.
And technically, it's personal property. I mean, the way I like to explain to my homeowners when we go in, because, I've sold some really high-end homes. I've had some that were, attorneys on both sides of the transaction. So we have a buyer that's an attorney. We have a seller that's an attorney. Neither one of them are real estate attorneys, but they're both attorneys. So, and we go in and there's fabulous things in this house. Like this one I can think of in my mind, it was amazing. Like she had these probably 500-year-old French gates that she imported from France and put them on both sides of the windows. I mean, it was decorated beautifully. It showed well, but there was a lot of things at the end of the day that were tacked down to that house. And so what I mean and what I say by definition, and I like to explain it so it's very clearly to anyone, is if we take your house and we turn it upside down, anything that would fall to the floor or fall by way of gravity is personal property.
Yes.
And anything that's personal, that's screwed into the wall or attached or affixed, that's real property. It comes with it. It's part of the house.
I can guarantee you most appraisers would be afraid to tell you they don't give value for appliances. More so because
people take them.
Exactly. But if we went to everybody's house and said, we give you no value for your appliances, they would probably report us to the DBPR.
Or they'd say, I'm taking my appliances with me.
Exactly. Or they'll argue, but it's in the contract. It doesn't matter. It's not in the next contract. It is really personal property. We do not look at above ground pools are not even put in within our reports, other than that they're a liability if something happens to them. We don't
I tell
put
people,
a value on them.
And the same thing like for lot premiums, because I know builders add different lot premiums for different, if you're on a conservation versus a house behind you. And I get that. But at the end of the day, when you go to resell that property,
3, 4, 5 years down the road, there is no lot premium when you're selling it. When you're reselling it,
here's the thing.
It's whatever the market is calling for.
As far as the appraisal is concerned, there's no lot premium in there for an adjustment, but a buyer is likely going to pick your home over another one.
Exactly.
If it has the nice appliances, if it's on a great lot, if you don't have a neighbor behind you, that kind of stuff.
Definitely. But there are places, I'll tell you, right now the inventory is so low that if there are two houses side by side, one has a conservation lot and one doesn't, I can guarantee you if they're the identical home, they're going to go for the conservation lot.
Absolutely.
But it doesn't always mean that the market is going to show a value difference between the two. Right now, the demand for housing is out there and there's no inventory on the market. If you're looking for a home, it's very, very hard to find where you're looking for. And so people are settling for
We get those calls, all the time. Oh, well, I saw this house on Julia. I saw this one on Zillow. I saw this one on Realtor.com.
They're gone.
It's
before
not
you
real-time
can get
data,
to it.
you guys. Let us pull it for you from the MLS because that's what we pay all that money to do that.
Yes.
So let's talk about unpermitted conversion, because we've had this come up recently on an appraisal report and we're dealing it right now on a different appraisal. So I would love and I realize that different appraisers can have different opinions, but we see this a lot, especially on a lot of these older homes that have been around forever. You have investors that repurchase it as a bank owned property or whatever. And they're, fixing it up. They rehabbed it. They resold it. But you might have this conversion in the back. You might have a garage conversion that's been completely closed and is converted. Sometimes it's on the property appraiser's website. Sometimes it's not, but it may have been there for 20 years. And occasionally we get flagged by appraisers. Sometimes we don't. Do you want to talk about that and what your opinion is of an appraiser and if you have any facts on
My
it?
opinion, as an appraiser, if you find it, you have to disclose it. The problem with garage conversions, especially, is county by county, they're different. In Pasco County, they look at it as, in some cases, as gross living area. In Hillsborough County, they look at it as an enclosed porch, and it's not living area. We'll go out to the home, and there'll be adequate air conditioning under the same dwelling, and it will meet the guidelines of being gross living area. However, the county doesn't look at it as gross living area. Enclosing a garage, if you leave the exterior door up, you don't have to pull a permit. And for an appraiser to...
So you're talking about you enclosed the garage, but you left the door there, so you have either a small space to still store some lawn equipment or whatever.
Or you just put drywall over it, put a box over it.
There might be nothing, but the door is still there.
Yeah, the door is still there. Nothing from the exterior of the home has been touched. It's when you start messing with the air conditioning, the plumbing, the electrical, that's what you need permits for. If you're not changing the actual layout of the home, and it's all interior work, if you rehab your kitchen, you don't have to pull a permit to do it. The problem with garage conversions is many subdivisions, they are an improvement because they all have them. And the houses that don't have garage conversions, they are smaller in square footage and they will sell for significantly less. There are neighborhoods out there that the homeowners bought smaller homes, enclosed the garage, got the gross living area up to what they were comfortable with, and they can live without a garage. In this case, with your deal, the garage door could be removed for less probable. The drywall could be removed and the garage door and the garage could be returned to a garage for a very minimal cost. I don't really see why an appraiser would limit the verbiage. Fannie Mae has recently stated if the appraiser identifies an addition that does not have the required permit, the appraiser must comment on the quality and the appearance of the work and if it impacts any of the market value to the home. They do not say that we have to go out and police the work that was done. We don't know when it was done. In the case of this house, like you said, it could have been done 20 years ago. There's no permits found. The quality of the work that was done is average quality. There's no deficiencies. That's all that needs to be noted within the appraisal report. Actually saying that it could possibly cause an effect on the value, the appraiser can't predict that. So it shouldn't really, unless it's in a subdivision that garage conversions bring value to homes, it's really hard for me to say that I would actually put that within my appraisal report. Liability on an appraiser right now is very, very high.
Yeah, we're talking
about
this.
We are very policed. Every appraisal, every time we sign our name, we are signing our jobs and our businesses away. One mistake can cost you a very costly fine, but that fine puts a black mark against your name. And that black mark against your name will put you unemployed. Because right now you need a background check, a credit check, a security clearance. You need to go through an AMC or a major appraisal management company that distributes the reports to you. There's so many people policing us that appraisers right now are putting stuff in their appraisals to make sure that the liability doesn't come back on them. And so it's a two-way street there. Some appraisers do it because they feel that it's necessary and they have to. And some appraisers just choose not to.
It's interesting how you can get such a different opinion from one appraiser to the next.
Exactly.
So you're listening to Tampa Home Talk. This is your host, Katrina Madewell, on the Real Estate Radio Network. When we come back in just a minute, we're going to talk about some of the things that you guys do when you look up properties. We'll talk about some of the things that we do as a real estate professional when we look up properties. And how do we determine what the final comparable homes are going to be used are, and talk about adjustments for closing costs and some fabulous stuff coming back. You're listening to Tampa Home Talk. If you missed any part of our show with Danielle Evans today of Gateway Appraisal Services, please check us out on the web and get our podcast at tampahometalk.com. Be back in just a minute.
Hi, this is Aaron Davis, owner of Hillsborough Title. Hillsborough Title is a local, family-owned title agency here in Tampa Bay. Our service, strength, and knowledge make us different. We've served Tampa Bay area for over 30 years. From Polk County to the Gulf, Pasco to Manatee, Tampa Bay, we've got you covered. Call us at 813-712-8888 or visit us on the web at thebesttitle.com. That's thebesttitle.com.
Curious what your Tampa home is worth? Here's an easy way to find out what homes like yours are selling for in today's market. Text the word value to 813-377-2775 for a free report on Tampa house prices. We'll send you a free report with up-to-the-minute statistics based on all homes for sale sold in your neighborhood over the last 6 months in all price ranges. To get your free report on Tampa Bay house prices, just call or text the word value to 813-377-2775.
My name's Carol Austin, and I want to talk about the Realtors Care Foundation of GTAR, and I'm the CEO there. The foundation is here to help you with down payment assistance and education. Please visit us at therealtorscareofgtar.org.
Hi, I'm Ike Antonio Thomas, Director of Salitas House, where we offer homeownership workshops, pre-purchase counseling, foreclosure intervention counseling for homeowners at risk of losing their home, financial coaching for adults and teens. Come sign up for our program where if you save $1,000, we'll give you $1,000. Call us 813-425-4847. Again, 813-425-4847. You can like us on Facebook or you can find us on the web, salitashouse.com.
Curious where your credit score is? Text the word credit to 813-377-2775. Not sure where it needs to be in order to buy? We'll tell you. Simply text the word credit to 813-377-2775 for access to your credit score now.
Welcome back to Tampa Home Talk. This is your host, Katrina Madewell. Thank you so much for chiming in today. You can catch us here at 1340 Tan Talk every Thursday and Saturday at 5 p.m. Delighted to have in studio with me today Danielle Evans of Gateway Appraisal Services. Thanks for joining us again today. We've had some fantastic conversations around different opinions, property conditions, what they look like, what they don't look for. There's so many things. So we're going to get into next how we actually dive into all that data, because we got to process a lot of data to kind of get to the final thing. We do it as well, but you guys do it a lot more in detail because it's your job. That's what they're paying you guys to do. We're paid to market, sell, and get the highest price we can for the homeowner, right? And the lowest price for the buyer. But so let's talk about how you guys actually look properties up. You know, what kind of data you pick? What do you use to determine, you know, the final homes that you consider comparables? Like, how do you go through that process?
We start with a CMA just like an agent does, but we limit our CMA.
CMA means comparative market analysis.
Yes.
So you're looking at comparable homes, the market condition right now, and you're going to analyze that data and break it down.
Exactly. And we limit the amount of stuff we put into the search system. That way it pulls every potential sale within a radius. And then it's within a 25% of the gross living area. It has to bracket the land size, bracket the gross living area. It has to bracket all the amenities, the bedroom and bathroom count. So we start with sometimes 50, 60 comparable sales that could possibly be viable. And we need to research them all the way down to find the 3 that are the best. In some cases, 4 or 5, depending on the lender and what the lender requirements are.
And sometimes as an appraiser, would you put extra comps in there if you felt like it was warranted?
I always put extra comps in my reports, not only as supportive evidence, but if I feel that there is too many adjustments on the comparables that I have found, I will use a dated sale that will prove and kind of make it all blend together, and it makes it more understandable.
So when you say a dated sale, you mean something that's a little bit older in time?
Something that was sold nine months ago versus 30 days ago.
Gotcha.
But it was still viable at the time, and the market is stable, and you can actually see the differences in the adjustments, and you can prove the match paired analysis. The biggest problem with appraisers right now is when a lender comes to us and says, how did you come up with that adjustment? If we don't have a valid reason for that adjustment being there, we will no longer work.
Now, what type of adjustments do you see? Like, what kind of stuff do they ask you about later?
Well, they want us to know how we came up with our land value. How did we come up with the condition, that adjustment for the difference in condition of C3 to C4? And all of that is by paired analysis, but you can't always find the exact same house. So adjustments are needed, and you have to break down and figure out what that adjustment is based on the matched pairs. Even if those matched pairs aren't the comparable sales that are going to end up in your appraisal at the end, it's the data that you've used. You've taken all of the potential sales over the past 12 months, and you've come up with enough data to prove the adjustment. Because when a lender comes back and says that adjustment was not warranted, if you don't have good reason for why you put it on there, it shouldn't be on there in the first place.
Now, I know for me, when I go in to look at data and I'm trying to determine what a market value should be for a client to list their home, for example, or even if a buyer is going to make an offer, I go in, we go to the subject, and I pull usually within a 1 mile radius. I try to do conservatively within 20% of the square footage. If we need to go a little more, we do, or a little less. But then I try to kind of look what's most comparable, closest to that subject property out. Meaning if there's some really good comps that are right there in the median neighborhood, we need to give that a lot more weight versus trying to go outside of the neighborhood.
Exactly. And an appraiser will do the same, but staying within lender specific guidelines is the difficult part. If the stuff within the immediate neighborhood doesn't fall within the lender specific guidelines, technically the appraiser is not allowed to use those comps within the comp 1, 2, and 3 spot.
Now, when you say lender specific guidelines, what type of things are you talking about, for example?
A lender will give an appraiser an engagement letter, which is the directions on your appraisal. I have some lenders that are they're as long as 16 pages of directions, everything from what I'm supposed to take a picture of to where I'm supposed to look for my comps. As far as they don't want year-old comps. They don't want you going over a mile, and they specifically state it within their engagement letters. We all know that there's that one house on 6 acres in the middle of nowhere, and there are no homes within a mile that are comparable. And you have to go 5 miles out. You have to exceed the 25% guidelines.
I think a lot of times what I found is those apply to properties that are huge, like a lot of bigger properties or big pieces of land. So like if it's a half acre, or something like that.
Any home can be within a community if it's if it's a unique property. It can be located anywhere within any subdivision, and lenders see on paper one thing, and the appraiser gets out to the house and sees a whole nother ballgame when they get out there.
Well, you guys are kind of like the eyes and the ears for the bank.
Oh yeah, definitely. And we're expected to take photos to document everything. We take over 30 pictures at every single appraisal. That inspection. So
it's in USDA properties, we see those a lot too. And then the interesting thing too, because coming from the mortgage world, they never did this before, but they're starting to do it now. They actually adjust for closing concessions. So if someone paid $100,000 for a property and they gave them $3,000 in closing costs, they're making adjustments for that, right?
Yes. It depends on the lender. I'll be honest with you. I personally will put an addendum within my appraisal that that loan concessions were found, an adjustment was made. However, the adjustment is made based on the lender-specific guidelines 9 times out of 10. If I'm not told to put that adjustment there, it's usually not there. Some lenders want it there, some lenders don't. But it's a dollar for dollar, and there's no way for an appraiser to really they won't accept the appraisal if you don't put it on there. And so my company in particular, and if it's a specific lender that we know requires the adjustment, we put it. But if it's a lender that doesn't require it, we don't put it, because there's no way to actually, we don't see the contracts for the comparable sales. It's not something that we should be putting an adjustment for, but sometimes we're forced to.
You're listening to Tampa Home Talk with your host, Katrina Madewell. We're here in studio today with Danielle Evans of Gateway Appraisal Services. We've also had join us since our last break, Sarah Cricky with Silverton Mortgage. I'm sure she can shed a little bit of light as well on some of the things that we see for adjustments. And it's interesting because as far as the appraisal reports go, like we were talking about this at lunch the other day, USDA properties versus FHA can have floors versus not. And you guys are commenting on that stuff, right, Danielle?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And then you guys are following the guidelines, Sarah.
Absolutely.
So talk about those things from a lender's perspective and also from the appraiser's perspective. Like,
well, for a USDA property, a USDA appraisal basically has to meet FHA handbook standards. So a USDA report is very similar to an FHA report with respect to the requirements that the property must have, the condition the property must be in. There are some differences, for example, that you might have already discussed, where carpet and flooring is a non-issue for USDA, where it's a major issue for FHA. With regards to USDA lending, that's geography specific. We have to adhere to USDA's maps with respect to where the property is located. Those areas include homes that are in populated neighborhoods, and those homes sometimes have pools. So, for example, from a lending perspective, USDA will not lend on a pool. They originated as a rural program, and so even though their maps cover areas that are heavily populated now, they don't lend on pools. So if a person's trying to purchase a home and go with USDA financing, for example, that home would need to appraise for the contract price with no merit being given to the pool, no value given to the pool whatsoever.
So how does that work for you from an appraisal standpoint? Would you get the order and in your instructions that actually states no pool, or do you already know that with USDA?
We already know it with USDA. We know that we're not supposed to put a value particularly on the pool. But that brings it back to just basic appraising, apples to apples, not apples to oranges. You're not going to go find comps that don't have pools. You're still going to appraise the home as it has a pool, and all of the comps are going to have pools too. And then you're going to make an across-the-board adjustment and remove the pool from the value of your appraisal.
The lender is looking for the appraised value minus the pool, but they still want the report to include a contributory value for the pool, just as a side note.
Exactly. They want to know what the pool is worth. And so for an appraiser to use all non-pool homes to compare it to would not be a proper way to appraise it. You would still appraise it with comparable sales that have pools, and then you just take it away.
Gotcha. So this is your host, Katrina Madewell. You're listening to Tampa Home Talk. We're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back in just a minute, we're going to talk about some of the things that you guys see as appraisers that are just crazy things you have to get past. We deal with them occasionally in the real estate world. But we're also going to talk about the number one mistake that agents make when not meeting the appraiser in the property and some of the things that need to be done and ready for when you guys go to the property. We'll be back in just a minute.
Ask me about an inside secret to save several hundreds of dollars on your annual homeowner's insurance premium. Text the word WIND, W-I-N-D, to 813-377-2775. Again, 813-377-2775.
I'm John Rakowski, the broker with Charles Ruttenberg Realty. If you are a real estate agent and want to keep more of your hard-earned commission, call me today at 727-538-9200 extension 2. This call will change your real estate career.
Hi, I'm Ike Antonio Thomas, Director of Salitas House, where we offer homeownership workshops, pre-purchase counseling, foreclosure intervention counseling for homeowners at risk of losing their home, financial coaching for adults and teens. Come sign up for our program where if you save $1,000, we'll give you $1,000. Call us 813-425-4847. Again, 813-425-4847. You can like us on Facebook or you can find us on the web, salitashouse.com.
Welcome back to Tampa Home Talk. This is your host, Katrina Madewell, on the Real Estate Radio Network. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. You can catch us here every Thursday and Saturday at 5 p.m. Also on our website at tampahometalk.com and across the web on Facebook, Twitter at Tampa Home Talk, and catch every single one of our shows available on a podcast. If you're just joining us, we have Danielle Evans with Gateway Appraisal Services and Sarah Cricky with Silverton Mortgage joining us today in studio. And so some of the things that we were talking about before we had to break was the number one thing that I see when the appraisal appointment is set. some of the big hurdles, and we talked about this over lunch, so I know you agree with me, and I'd love to have you chime in on it, but I think the realtor should always meet the appraiser there with comps, whether they take them, they don't take them, whatever. You meet them there, give them facts, tell them things that have been upgraded in the home, tell them about, you know, everything that's been done to that home, anything you know about the neighborhood, because it's only going to help them deliver a strong appraisal report.
Yes, and a lot of appraisers won't take comps because they're afraid that it will look like coercion or that you're trying to sway the value. In my opinion, if you have research material, I have to verify it anyways. All you did was make my job easier. You printed the actual file for me and saved my company money.
I mean, the bottom line is you guys are going to pick the final comps.
We pick the final
All we're doing
comp.
is giving you data.
And you're giving us your professional advice in addition, and we don't always know every single market that we're in by like the back of our hand. And there are some very unique areas that an agent's experience and their knowledge is valuable to an appraiser. Absolutely.
So, you know, if you're buying or selling a property, you need to make sure that your agents are meeting the appraiser out there and making sure they have all the facts and data that they need. For this Saturday show, just want to give you a little tease. You'll definitely want to check her out and make sure that you tune in back here on 1340 for the 5 o'clock show on Saturday, because Sarah's going to go over the FHA Back to Work program. We're going to tell you about how you can actually purchase a home if you had a short sale, foreclosure, or deed in lieu, and how you can do that sooner than the guidelines. And we're going to tell you all about that during the Saturday show. But some of the things for the appraiser that needs to be done whenever you guys go out there before you ever get there. And sometimes we get caught up in, oh, let's make the appointment, make sure everybody knows we're coming and that type of stuff. But what are the things you guys see regularly? I know some of the things I can mention off the top of my head, but to not have to send you back out to do a reinspection and charge that fee.
The number one reinspection fee comes from not having the utilities turned on when the appraiser gets there. I am an appraiser that will turn on the water from the street. I will turn on the electric from the electric box, but I do take liability and I pay extra for insurance for that liability that I'm taking. Other appraisers, it is their right to refuse to turn on the water unless it's already on. And I completely agree with their decision as well, because mistakes happen and everybody does. They blame the appraiser at the end of the day. But if an agent doesn't show up to a home and the water and the electricity needs to be on for an FHA inspection, we leave the property and your appraisal is noted that it is not FHA insurable due to the fact that an agent didn't show up to the property. It doesn't say it in those specific words, but it says the water and electricity was shut off, therefore this home is not insurable through FHA financing. That killed your deal because your agent didn't show up at the home. Then,
so from a lender's perspective, why do those things need to be on, Sarah? Like, why is it important that we make sure the water and the electric's on?
Because the FHA program is a very borrower protective program, and they want to make sure that major components are functional in the property. They want to make sure, for example, that the plumbing's operational. They can't test the plumbing unless the water's running. They want to make sure the air handler works. They want to make sure the hot water heater works. They want to make sure that there aren't any leaks. You know, things that could be an expense to a buyer.
They're not going to have after they've put out their money for their closing costs and their down payment.
Correct. Things that would be any type of a safety, sanitary issue are important for an FHA appraisal. But also, again, they don't want the borrower going into a transaction and then closing and having to replace all of the plumbing in the house and it was never tested
or documented.
Correct.
And we need both the electricity and the water turned on at the same time. Not one day the water's on, one day the electric's on. It doesn't work that way. We have to flush the toilet and run the water at the same time. And we need a picture of the bathroom light on to make instead of having
so they know the power was on.
Well, we have to provide pictures to the lender. Do you want to give them 3 pictures or make your life easier and take one picture of the toilet flushing, the sink running, and the bathroom light on all in one picture? It appeases the lender.
Right. And it's important to make sure those things are done because they, you know, if they're done after the fact, the appraiser has to go back out and it's an additional expense that could be avoided. So
what are some of the other things that you guys see triggering a reinspect?
Locked doors that we can't get through. Agents constantly send us to homes that they know there's a roommate situation and there's actual locked doors on the bedrooms, if there's one room in the house that we can't get into, it needs to be disclosed within the appraisal, and a reinspection would be required. Your actual appraisal would not be an as-is appraisal. It would be per completion of inspection of that room. So the appraisal is, in essence, worthless until the reinspection happens.
So what other things? We talked about bars on the windows.
Bars on the windows is another big thing. If you're trying to get FHA financing, it's just not a good idea for them to be there. A lot of inspections, and they're very hard to get the lender to accept them. The bars on the windows are a really hard problem for us in St. Pete because they're on a lot of houses in St. Pete.
And that you mentioned the GFC outlets in the kitchen too, right, Sarah? You guys are seeing that a lot.
Yep, need to
on
make
the FHA loans.
Correct. Smoke detectors is another issue.
And carbon monoxide detectors, even if it's not required within the state, if the lender is from California, the lender requires that carbon monoxide detector in the home. Even it's not a Florida requirement; it's California requirement. The California lender will require it in the house here in Florida.
It's interesting how things can vary so much from one lender to the next. So let's talk about one final little subject, because I know we have to close the show here, but hoarding. We talked about that over lunch. I mean, I know there's times we see it. There's times you goes in and appraisers and you see stuff piled 4 foot high because they're hoarders, and you have to make your way through a little path. How does that impact the appraisal?
It impacts the appraisal because now everything is looked at as extremely depreciated. So carpet, non-existent. It's looked at, it's not there. It needs to be replaced. The drywall, the paint, the fixtures, the electrical, the plumbing. If they did not maintain any part of the interior of the house, what's to say that they maintained the roof, the electrical, the plumbing? So it does cast a negative light upon the home as far as the depreciation is more extreme than a home that is well maintained. And all of the comps that are used should be in the same or similar condition. And 9 times out of 10, those are bank-owned homes that don't have somebody living in them.
Does it affect anything that you can't see? Like, for example, because if there's a lot of stuff in a hoarder's house, there's many places that you can't see.
And that's when an appraiser has to add 2-3 pages of addendum stating that they were not able to visibly inspect the entire home, and to remove the liability off the appraiser has to, write a couple paragraphs of why things weren't. We don't know. Could there even be drywall behind that furniture? Because the home, in some cases, these homes have leaking roofs and there's still people living in them with active black mold.
It's crazy. Some of the stuff that we see, even if you watch the show Hoarders, there's nonstop, like, stuff that's piled high. I mean, you can't even find the kitchen sink in some of these houses.
We see it more than not, and sometimes it's even your next door neighbor.
You're listening to Tampa Home Talk. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We'll be back on Saturday afternoon with Sarah Cricky, Silverton Mortgage. We're going to be discussing mortgage follies and the 10 things you need to know before you ever think about getting a mortgage home loan. We'll be back on Saturday on 1340, and across the web, you can catch us on TampaHometalk.com. Bye for now. 'Cause it's a long